above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways of man. You were here before the world began. Above all kingdoms, above all thrones, above all wonders the world has ever known, above all wealth and treasures of the earth, there's no way to measure what you're worth. Crucified and laid behind a stone, you lived to die, rejected and alone, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all. Above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways of man. You were here before the world began. Above all kingdoms, above all thrones, above all wonders the world has ever known, above all wealth and treasures of the earth, there's no way to measure what you're worth. Crucified, laid behind a stone, you lived to die, rejected and alone, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all. Oh, you were crucified and laid behind a stone. You lived to die, rejected and alone, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all.
Ephesians 4:15 and Proverbs 3:5 will be where we take two of our scriptures to kind of get us going tonight as we continue our study on the Sponsoring Church of a Mission. It's been a little bit since we studied this last due to military duties and business meetings and all those other things. So hopefully you'll remember that when we left off previously, we had already started talking about that relationship between the church and that missionary, and how when they enter into a relationship, that relationship has to be a solid, loving relationship for them to go forth and accomplish a great deed and accomplish a great mission for the Lord in establishing a local New Testament church in another area in need of one. So the relationship is huge, and tonight we're going to kind of continue that idea and that mentality of that relationship and what goes into that, and then we're also going to start talking about what are some practicalities, right? If you're going to do that, if a church is going to send forth a missionary, whether it be here in Texas as a state missionary, whether it be throughout America as a national missionary, or even overseas, what are some practical things that we need to do, or what would a church need to do? We're going to talk about some of those. Ephesians 4:15, if you have that verse of Scripture, what I kind of want you to hone in on is the very first portion of that. Jesse, do you have Ephesians 4:15? Yes, sir. All right, read that into your microphone out loud for me.
But speaking the truth in love may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ.
All right, notice what he said, speaking the truth. How? In love. There is a dramatic difference between speaking the truth and speaking the truth in love, right? And you don't believe me, get into any kind of relationship, whether you're married, your spouse, or whether it's a friendship, or whether it's with your boss and your employer, whatever it may be. If you speak the truth, that can be that can come across as harsh. It can come across as a little bit abrasive. It can come across as you trying to knock somebody over the head with it. But if you speak it in love, right? Did you notice that as Jesse was reading here, if you speak the truth in love, may grow up unto him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. There is a growth, and there is a benefit, and there is a blessing to speaking the truth in love. So therefore, as this church and as this missionary enter into a relationship, they have to be able to speak truth in love to each other. Now, also on that coin, we have Proverbs 3:5, and that's a very familiar passage of Scripture. Jesse, do you have that one or no? All right, well, 3:5 for us, please.
Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding.
All right, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, right? An idea and an attitude of trust, right? That you're going to trust the Lord. Lord, I may not know exactly what you're going to do. I may not know exactly how you're going to do it, but I trust that you're going to do it for my benefit and my goodness, right? So you're just trusting the Lord that whatever decision and whatever he does is for the best, and that you're going to go with whatever he decides. This idea of trust and then communication has to be in that relationship between church and missionary. Now, let me ask you this. Is this relationship, or is this idea of a trust and communication, can this be built off of this? Can trust come with communication? The more you communicate, can it build trust? As long as it's done how? Okay. So the more that you communicate, and that's why I drew all these crazy arrows here, the more you communicate, the more it builds trust. The more you trust, the more you do what? Communicate. Isn't that right? The more you communicate with someone, the more you'll start to trust them. And the more you start to trust them, the more you'll start telling them a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. You don't believe me? Go back to your own relationships, right? I think back to mine and my wife's relationship when we first started dating and trying to learn and feel each other out, right? There's that element when you're just trying to feel that person out and figure out who they are as a person, right? Well, you got to communicate with them, right? You've got to tell them something, but you're hesitant. Well, if I'm too transparent, if I'm too who I really am, it might scare them off and they may head for the hills, right? Or at least that was me, right? So let me be very cautious about how I communicate. But the more I communicated, the more I learned to trust. And as I trusted more, then I communicated more. It's a cyclic relationship. And what it'll do if you have trust and if you have good communication, that relationship will get stronger and stronger and stronger, right? Now, like I said, initially, in the initial stages of this, you've got to exercise a little bit of faith. You've got to exercise enough faith to say, all right, I'm going to make myself vulnerable here, and I'm going to communicate something to them that they may not like to hear. Or I'm going to communicate something to them that nobody else may know, but I really need to let them know this, right? And so you have to have the courage and the faith to say, you know what, if we're going to be in this relationship, this has to be known. So I'm going to take this leap of faith and I'm going to communicate this to them. Now, the more you do that, as I said, you broach those little moments where, okay, this may be a difficult conversation, or this may be a difficult thing for me to express to them or to tell them. The more you do that, the more you will trust. And as I said, that relationship gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, why does that relationship, why do I keep hammering it? Why does it need to be so strong between missionary and sending church? Okay, so they may be great distances apart, right? So, for example, what about a church here in Texas that sends forth a missionary to Southeast Asia, right? So they're far away. They're away from their family. They're away from their support network. We're their support network, but now they're way away, and they're going to have some kind of lifeline, and that lifeline is in communication. Praise the Lord, now we have modern marvels, right? We have all these different technological means by which to communicate and stay in contact, but you've got to have this. So the missionary may be on a foreign field. Is mission work difficult? Yes, of course. Understatement of the year, right? Yes, it's very difficult, right? People think, well, if you're a pastor of a church, you got it made. Ha, 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 right? And then some people think, well, if you're a missionary, you got it made. Ha, 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 right? It's hard all over, right? Because you're trying to do the Lord's work in a world that is in opposition to the Lord's work. So no matter whether it's a mission work, whether it's pastoring of a church, these two guys, the pastor and the missionary, you know what? They ought to be able to commiserate, and they ought to be able to support and help each other. Now, a lot of times, people will get this all mixed up. They'll think, well, if it's a sending church and a missionary, then the pastor's the big dog, and the missionary's down here, right? And some people will say, well, hold on now, brother. That missionary, and he's out there on the field, and he's out there, and he's facing the lines, and he's trying to get something going from the ground up, and he's got a way harder task than that pastor, so the missionary ought to be the big dog. Pastor ought to just be doing whatever he can to support him, right? Some people have these different ideas, but in reality, it ought to be a what? Right? There's no big I and little you. No. You're working together. You should be working together as a pastor and a missionary in a sending church in a mission congregation to do the Lord's work, right? To get that local New Testament church established in a place that is in such desperate need of it, right? Oh, man, I sure am glad that we have this church here in Waco, and, man, I don't know what I'd do without it, right? There are places without it. There are places without a church of such a nature. A church that is loving and stands for the truth and wants to love people where they're at and help those who are broken and try to lift up the saints, right? But there are other places who don't have that. So with that said, this pastor and this missionary in the congregation's got to work together to keep the main thing, exalting Christ and seeing a local New Testament church established and flourishing. Because ultimately, when you're doing the mission work, that's what you want to happen. But if you're going to have trust and communication in this relationship, do you also need an agreement? I don't see where it would hurt. Some people would call this your mission policy. All right, some will call this your mission policy. Your mission policy is basically something that is collaborated upon, right? This is not something that the church does in a vacuum. This is not something the missionary just develops on his own while he's out on the field and shoots back by email and says, hey, I need y'all to approve this, right? No. This is a collaborative effort, right? This policy must be built with the missionary. Now, the church, since they're the sending church and they're the ones who are kind of, the guiding force and the financial force behind a lot of this, they need to have ultimate kind of I don't want to say the say-so over the policy, but the interpretation and enforcement of the policy that's where the church needs to step in. However, it needs to be a collaborative effort in its development, okay? In its development, got to be a collaborative effort. And in that agreement, I didn't write every single little thing you need to have in there, but I gave some ideas, right? Some ideas that you need to have in that mission policy so that down the road, there's not a train wreck, right? There's not a blow up. There's not all of a sudden that missionary out there floating by themselves because now the sponsoring church got mad at them, and now they said, well, we're withdrawing support then. No. Nobody wants that. The main thing's got to be the main thing, and in order to keep it the main thing, you kind of have a policy so that everybody's clearly understanding what's going on. When me and Rachel were getting ready to get married, I don't know if every one of y'all did this, but anybody, when you got married, before you got married, had to go see the preacher a couple times? No, oh, okay. Well, all right. Well, man. All right. Well, I'm expecting more. Anyway, before you get married, the pastor who was going to marry us had a policy that you got to come see me at least 3 or 4 times, and we're just going to talk about expectations for the marriage, right? Expectations for the marriage. Oh, no, love's going to pay the bills, and love's going to do everything. Well, yeah, love will do a lot. Love will do a lot. But isn't it great when you already know what to expect? Isn't it great to know that when you're in that marriage and something comes up about the medical, oh, no, we already decided that before we got married. That's going to be Honeydew's job over there. He's going to take care of that. Oh, well, something come up with the vacuum cleaner. Hey, babe, no, that's baby's job, right? We already got it all figured out, right? It heads off problems and potential issues. So when you already know this going into that relationship and going into the work, you don't have the blow-ups and the discord and the right? So number one, purpose of the relationship. Why are we sending out a missionary in the first place? What is the point? Right? That's going to be a lot of money, Brother Raines. Why would we even want to do that? What in the, right? So the purpose of this relationship, sponsoring church and missionary, remember, collaborative effort, that missionary needs to get with that church and say, well, I believe that the Lord is calling me out to go into specified field and there to do what, right? Once he verbalizes it, that church has to say, well, yeah, we've been praying about that for years, and we've been praying about that, and that's something we can get behind, and yeah, we got the purpose established, and we know why we want you there. Now, you say, well, shouldn't that be common knowledge? Shouldn't both church and missionary already know why they're doing this? Should, right? That should is the key word, right? But what happens when you go into a relationship with a lot of assumptions? Right? If you go into a relationship with a lot of assumptions that you just assume, you didn't ask because you thought, well, I'm sure everybody knows that. Leave yourself open for what again? Discord and trouble and problems later on. So you go ahead and be very clear. We're sending this missionary out, and he has agreed that he's going out for this specific purpose. Nature of the proposed endeavor. For example, is this an endeavor in which we want a presence? Is that CE? I don't know. There we go. Pretty close. Presence, or do we want a local? Right? Do we want a presence, or do we want a local New Testament church? Is there a difference? You bet there is, right? And I'm not going to dime nobody out, but yeah, there is currently within the ABA Association, there is certain works that they have sent missionaries for. There's nothing in the agenda about establishing a church, okay? Nothing. It's not part of their plan. It's not part of their relationship. It's not part of their proposed endeavor. They just want somebody to be there and to have a Christ-like presence. And hey, you can throw a rock at that all you want, but that's what that church established, and that's what that missionary agreed upon. Now, I hope that they're making that clear to all those who are sending money to support them, that there is no plans for a local New Testament church. We're not going to try to establish that. We just need somebody who can be there and be a presence for Christ and the gospel. But there are also those who have the nature, listen, this is the purpose, this is what we want to do. We want to see a local New Testament church planted and thriving and then going forth on its own to propagate other churches in that area. That can be this nature of the relationship. So why are we doing this? What are we hoping to accomplish, right? Why are we doing it? What do we hope to accomplish? Oh, we want a presence? Maybe it's all. Or do we want a local New Testament church, right? That needs to be understood, especially when you start getting down here and you start talking about a recommendation to sister churches. You better be open and honest with them if you expect them to start sending money, right? They need to know that. Goals of the project. What if that missionary goes on the field and he thinks, all right, I'm here, man. I'm here. As long as one of these days in the near future, 10, 15 years, whatever. As long as one of these days in the near future, 10, 15 years, we get a church established, all's going to be well. And what if that church has in their mindset, boy, we sure hope we have one by year 5 or 6. You got to, right? They're not on the same page. Not on the same page. So you establish what are the goals. Now, God has a say-so, right? God has a say-so in this. God has a say-so. He gives the increase. Some of these goals you need to be flexible with, perhaps, but you need to at least have at least an idea, right? What is it we're hoping to accomplish? What would we like to see happen by this, X number of date and so forth, so that we can both go forward on the same page. If you're an ABA recommended missionary and you're on that poster out there for salary needs, there's usually timelines already established that they're hoping to see you meet. So just kicking that out there. So goals of the project, expectations for the missionary. Right? Expectations for the missionary. We expect that missionary to come back and report to us in person at least once every 2 years. Do you think that missionary would need to know that? Yeah. And what if our expectation is that he meets that out of his own pocket? Ooh, I think he needs to know that, right? So expectations for that missionary, they need to be spelled out and clear. Don't just assume he knows. Well, I'm sure they taught him that in seminary. Don't assume that. Make it clear what we expect of this guy. What do we expect of him? Do we expect him to send out monthly reports? Or once a year is fine? How often do you want to hear about what's going on? How often do you want to hear about how that money's being spent, right? You might want to know these things. It needs to be expected. We expect you to do this report at this point. We want to see, all these things need to be established. But also the sending church. What if he expects the sending church? What if he expects that the pastor and the deacons or the missionary committee, what if he expects them to come to visit him? And they never do. You think that's going to cause a touchy point in the relationship? Oh, man. I thought they loved me. I thought we had this great communication going on. But no, they sent me out here and they don't even come see me. Well, now you got some issues going on. And it was all because you entered into that relationship and nothing was clearly established or articulated. So now you need to have these things expected. The expectations need to be made known. Financial agreement. Oh, no, God's going to pay the bills, right? Yeah, God is an awesome God. Roger that. We got it. But if all of a sudden they're on the mission and the mission requires a $500 purchase, is that something that is okay? We're going to say, okay, that missionary, we're giving him the leeway to go ahead and spend that on behalf of the church. He's got a church credit card and everything's going to go great. Or is there certain limitations, right? The finances need to be spelled out. People are touchy about money. I don't know if you know it, but they are, right? Right? My mother worked at a bank for 40 years, and whoa, people are touchy, right? If something happens to their account or something's not right, they'll come in there, horns sharp and stuff ablazing, right? It doesn't go well. It doesn't go well. So you need to have the finances clearly articulated. Here's what we're going to pay you. Here's what we're going to do for insurance. Here's what we're going to do for vacation. Everything needs to be spelled out. Well, if he is a man, stop all that. Right? He is a man who has to pay bills just like everybody else. So it needs to be articulated. Recommendation to sister churches. Is he supposed to do that? Or is the sending church supposed to do that? Has to be spelled out. What if he is expecting his sending church to be his cheerleader? What if he's expecting his sending church to be sending out letters to all the churches in the association in the work saying, hey man, we've got this missionary and we're so excited. He's going to go forth into Russia and he's going to do this great and mighty thing and he's going to plant a church. And what if he's expecting the church to do that and the church thought he was going to handle that? And then guess what? Nobody does it, right? Because you thought that, I thought you thought I would, no, right? And then nobody knows about it, and then you don't have any support, and then you have financial issues, and then you have that train wreck, right? Spell it out. Decision making, I'm going to come back to that one, and then down here on number 9, I put miscellaneous or other agreed upon details. So you and that church are hashing it all out. There's other things. This is not all inclusive. This is just an idea of what a policy would entail. Decision making. And I said I wanted to come back to that. Decision making. I'm going to put a big old star down here back. Why do you think I put a star by that decision making? Is he going to have to make some decisions? Okay, Jerry and Lori are both saying it all goes back to what? Trust. Communication, right? That missionary is going to have to be able to make some decisions, okay? Well, he's a part of this church. I get it, right? I get it. You're sending him out. He's a part of the church. He's going forth to establish a New Testament organization. We get it. But as a member and as a man who's out there trying to work in that culture and in that field, who knows it better than he, right? You show up about once a year to go visit them. You kind of get an idea of the culture and the problems and the things they face. You got an idea. They're out there immersed in it. They know what they're facing. They've got to be able to make some decisions without being sharpshooted or without having their legs cut out from under them. Who told you you could buy that? Right? Whoa, right? Right? Whoa. Now there's going to be issues, and now that relationship's, right? Because you didn't establish who was going to make decisions. Again, let me hearken back to marriage, right? When you entered into that marriage, well, baby, why did you go and spend that on such and such? We should have talked about that. Oh, we should have. So now I don't have a say in the finance, right? Oh, you've got to have it clearly articulated. Baby, if it's over $300, we need to chat about that, right? You need to have it decided that when you're making decisions, again, trust and communication are the key. Trust and communication are the key. You've got to have it figured out what decisions are we cool with him handling, and what decisions are we like, whoa, really we should have consulted us, right? That needs to be articulated, because if not, that decision-making point is going to cause a right? And then the main thing is going to get squished because we're all upset with each other. Exalting Christ, seeing souls saved, seeing a church established, that main thing is going to get relegated to second-tier status because we're too busy being mad at each other and upset with each other and giving a bad testimony to the world around us. So these things need to be remembered, and especially when you're talking about the policy. Now, I wrote up here missions committee. The church needs to make sure they establish this missions committee, and that needs to be an odd number of people, right? Odd number of people within the church, local church, right? So why do I say it needs to be an odd number of people? So what? You don't have a tie, right? You don't have a tie. Now, is this missions committee they got their thumb on the missionary? No. Okay, no. But these guys meet once a month before the business meeting, before the regularly scheduled church business meeting. So our business meeting is the last Wednesday of the month. They would meet maybe that Wednesday prior. And when they meet that Wednesday prior, they go, okay, what has happened with the mission since the church last met? And they would make sure that they have the highlights, maybe not all the lowlights, right? You don't want to just bombard the church with, oh, man, the mission is, right? And then the church is like, man, we need to just pop sling low and get out of this thing. Nope. Keep it positive. What are some good things happening with the mission? What are some things we need to be in prayer about? Prayer can do all things. What are some financial issues? We need to establish that. We need to get that under control. These are some things the missions committee works on. And a lot of times when you're having that mission committee, yes, it needs to be an odd number of people, but it also needs to be, I would say, not indefinite terms, right? If you get elected to put on that missions committee, you're not going to be on there for life. It's not your little honorary title to slap around. No, I'm on the missions committee. Well, chill out. You're only going to be on there 2 years. So it needs to be established, okay? So that hey, yeah, you're there, but the main thing is what? Exalting Christ, getting the church established, not giving you a position to hang over the church. You're working to exalt Christ. All right, so you'll have that missions committee. That's part of the church. They need to make sure they have that. And then finally tonight, I also want to just kind of elaborate a little bit more about that relationship between pastor and missionary, right? Pastor and missionary. That pastor needs to lead, okay? Needs to lead, right? In the military, especially in the Army, we have Rangers lead the way. And I always joke and say, well, chaplains lead the way, right? Well, ha, ha, ha. But in the church work, in this particular setting, the pastor has to lead. But you say, well, he's supposed to run everything? Because remember, ultimately, who's he supposed to be following? Right? He's supposed to be following Christ. So as he follows Christ, he needs to be bold enough and courageous enough to lead this endeavor. He needs to be a man who knows when to speak and when not to speak, okay? Because are there going to be some times when really that missionary should be the one speaking that? Yeah. Not you, pastor. Step down. Well, I'm going to go forth and I'm going to make sure that everybody knows that I'm brother so-and-so of the Landmark such and such church, and we're doing this endeavor, and blah, blah, blah. Is the spotlight on you, or is it on the main thing, right? Keep the main thing the main thing. Exalting Christ, seeing a church established. Don't get, I'm the big bad pastor doing this work. You're not. But you do need to lead as you follow Christ. And the church needs to allow him to lead. He needs to know when to speak, when not to speak. He needs to know when to act, when not to act as well. Now, he needs to be, and in my notes here, I was trying to put, I said he needs to be firm and loving. He needs to be courageous. And he needs to be a great cheerleader. That's what I have on notes. So what I mean by that is he doesn't need to take the emphasis and put it upon himself, but he needs to be willing to say, hey, man, we got a great work. We got a great work, and we got a great missionary. Man, he is working so hard out there. He's working his fingers to the bone, and he's out every day, and he's trying to get the gospel. Why is it so important, and this is just thinking, man, why is it so important to have a pastor in a local church who is serving as a cheerleader for that missionary and that mission work? Why is it so important? Okay, so one, the missionary feels supported. What else? Well, you hope. You hope, right? Let me ask you this. What if that missionary goes forth, and he's out there on that field, and that local church and that pastor do nothing as a cheerleader? He's going to feel isolated and alone. He's going to feel isolated and alone. And let me ask you this. How much support is he going to get from sister churches? Because you know what they're going to be thinking? If this guy is such a great work, how come his sponsoring church and pastor aren't pumping him up? They're going to think something's wrong, okay? They're going to think something's wrong. Either he's a lazy pastor and they're scared to vouch for him because they don't want to look bad, or something's going on out there that's unscriptural, right? So they're not going to get support from the association work or all these other churches who are hopefully praying for them. It's the hands off. They need to be somebody cheering it on, supporting it, lifting it. If he's on the field, can he go to all the association meetings? No, right? He can't go to all the association meetings. So while he's on the field, somebody's got to be at the association meeting saying, hey, man, this is awesome, right? And who's that? That pastor needs to be the one who's doing that. So pastor needs to be able to do that. He needs to have wisdom, know when to talk, when not to talk, when to act, when not to act. Missionary part of that relationship. Remember a couple weeks ago, and Jim was sitting over there, and I said, oh, man, Jim, if it wasn't bad, I'd come over there and high-five you. Remember that? Yeah, well, maybe not. But anyway, Jim answered a question, and he answered a question, and I was like, yes, that's what we want. What is the ultimate goal for that mission work in the end? An independent, local New Testament church. That's the ultimate goal, right? Now, if that missionary and that mission are out there, and again, this wasn't clearly articulated, so the sponsoring church is making all the shots, they're calling all the shots, they're making all the decisions. Is that mission ever going to be independent? And are they ever going to be feeling confident enough to organize? Are they ever going to feel confident enough to go forth on their own as an independent little church? Because why? Oh, mama church over here, they'll tell me what I need to do, right? Think about it with your own kids, right? You want them to eventually grow to what? Independence. You eventually want them to grow to independence. How do you do that? You extend a little bit of, you give them opportunities to show that they're learning. And then after you give them opportunities to show that they're learning, you say, okay, well, I'm going to let you do such and such, and we're going to trust that everything's going to be okay, right? And you just, right, you're checking, that turned out great, yeah, right? And the more you do that, what happens? The more independent and the stronger, and the next thing you know, I don't want to say flying, but Next thing you know, they're doing their thing, right? That missionary needs to be allowed to lead in the mission. Yes, I know you're sending him out. And I know he's a part of your church. We get all that. But if you don't let that missionary and that mission congregation do some things, right? You don't spell it out so we're all on the same page, and you don't ever give them the opportunity to act or ever give them the opportunity to make choices, ever give them the opportunity to lead and do things, guess what? Good luck on that. Good luck on that. Because if Mama Church ain't telling them, they don't know how to do it. Or they don't know what decision to make if Mama Church don't tell them, right? They just don't know. So the missionary, and again, it goes back to what? Oh, communication and trust. Oh, Brother Ranger hammering it. It's true. They've got to be some trust, and there's got to be communication, and that missionary and that mission congregation have to be able to take those little baby steps, right? They got to be able to take those baby steps into growing into being an independent local New Testament church. Don't micromanage. Local church can't micromanage the missionary or the mission. Don't do that. You'll handicap them. And by the way, I'm also going to throw this in there. If that missionary has a heart to see a local New Testament church, and I'm just throwing this out there as an example, Africa or Russia, is he going to be able to establish, and we're Central Texas, right? Central? Is he going to establish a Central Texas church in Russia? Well, he sure better, right? Wait a minute. Russia ain't Central Texas, is it? Neither is Africa, right? You got to be able to trust that even though the methodology may be a little bit different to accommodate that culture, that the message and the teachings will always be the same, right? Teachings and the doctrines got to be the central element, right? Main thing, the main thing. Main thing, the main thing. That culture, they may have to do different routes to reach that culture, and that's okay, right? They may have to use different methodologies or different skill set, whatever. But again, it goes back to trust and communication. Keep the main thing, exalting Christ, seeing the church established in doctrine and in truth, while at the same time knowing that, listen, that church is being established. It's not a Central Texas church or whatever it may be. It's a church in Africa or Russia or New York or wherever it's being established at. And that missionary's got to be able to do that without you cutting his legs out from under him. What do you mean y'all went out and did such and such? We'd never done that here. That's right, because you ain't there, right? Let them do the thing. Because ultimately you want that church established and strong and self-supporting, doing the work of a New Testament church. Hopefully, remember, what's the key? Hopefully, just like with your kids, right? Just like your kids. You hopefully, ultimately, one day, not only will you want to see a church established, but then that church sending out what? Missionaries. There we go, right? Churches propagating churches. That's how we got here, right? Churches propagating churches. Perpetuity is the key in what you're hopefully trying to establish and keep going. All right, questions or comments? I know that's kind of long and drawn out, but questions or comments, those are just practicality type stuff. All right.
What would be the purpose to send out a missionary for a friend?
I'll give you an example of one. How about that? We currently have a missionary sent out to China. In China, you cannot establish a church, but you can have a presence. And he goes to China not as a missionary, right? That church has sent him out to China, not necessarily as a missionary on his card or status, but he's sent out as an educator. He's a teacher. Now, while he's there teaching in China, is he able to build relationships and ultimately communicate the gospel? Yeah. But that can't be part of the equation. And as long as that church and that missionary are aware of that, and the churches who are supporting him understand that, right? We're not going to see a church spring up in China, although it may be an underground church. We don't know. But, hey, we got to understand there's going to be a presence or it's going to be a church. And that's just an example of one.